All right, so we've been having some trouble kind of understanding, I guess, what's going on with the corridors or why we did things certain ways, and it's hard to get everybody together at once and everybody understand what's going on. And honestly, the best way to do it, as much as people hate it, is to look at the computer and see what the model's doing and why we made decisions that we made, and the thoughts behind it. So I wanted to put together this quick video of the Lake Boreham project and just kind of show you some of the things that are going and why the model was so important to follow and to use during the construction of this. And if it hasn't been followed and kind of winged in there, then yeah, our material quantities are going to be a little different and our ditches may not work super well. So first of all, the problem. The problem is we have a lot of pretty shallow slopes. 0.5% there. We got 1% there, so that's not too bad, but 0.4, we got 0.38. We just have slopes along this road that are not real steep, and what that means is when we're flowing along here and say we're cutting a ditch on one side or the other of this road and we're just letting the assembly or the typical section control, that means our ditch is now sloped at 0.38. And we know that that doesn't work super well, especially if you start getting super elevations involved and that those points start lifting up and down. Your ditch starts getting ups and downs and bird baths, and it's really an earthen ditch at 0.3 or 0.5 even. It's pretty tough to construct without weird things in it. So that prompted me to go ahead and just take a look at the ditches, and I ran profiles down the ditches to see what it was they were doing. So it's come into the first area here where we're doing some construction. Here's the culvert we're not touching. I think it's BIA or something culvert there, but that's the big culvert. So once you get under that and then you start to get into this cut on the northwest side of the road here. You can see I ran this profile here along our ditch just to see kind of how things were going, and then we also needed to be able to bury our culvert to get cover or to make it work. So rather than just letting the ditch randomly control and then have to kind of wing it in the field, we went ahead and designed it. So you can see right back here, see where my orange line is matching up really well with my green line right here. So look right there. You can see my blue as we follow. So you can tell, and then here look at the red line and the blue line. The red line is what the ditch would do without me taking control of it, essentially. So we're coming along and we're just matching ditch lines from upstream here. So water should be flowing down. And then right at this point, there's kind of almost a spot where you could stick a culvert. But instead, we thought, well, let's just push this down and continue making the water come this way. And granted, these are grades that are low too. They're still your 0.5% grades, but they're steeper than what was showing by the culvert or by the typical section. If we'd have just let it control. And we just basically made it so that we could flow this back to this culvert here, and we set the ditch elevation such that the culvert would flow, would work. And also here you can see then as I come along this that my orange line where my ditch would have been is no longer the case where the current ditch is. The ditch is now to the northwest, because as it got deeper or away from what the typical section would have shown, it had to also get further away from the road in order to maintain the same slope, right? So you can see that divergence there. So by the time we get down here to the culvert, and then here you can see we've designed these inlet basins right here, where it actually opens up. So by the time we get down to here where the ditch is essentially the deepest, right? If we look at the difference just quickly, roughly, the difference between where the ditch is and where it would have been, and you can kind of see down here, my measurement here, I'm looking at, 5, 6, 7 feet in here difference. So technically my ditch line should be 5 to 7 feet out from what it would have been with a typical section, just letting it control because of this depth we added in order to get water to flow down here to this culvert. And then in addition to that, so not only are you 5 to 7 feet to just get to the flow line, you're an additional 7 to 8 feet to get out to where our catch basin is. So there's a significant, it's not going to be multi-thousands of yards, but there's a significant amount of material that's going to take place here as you cut that back into the hill. So yeah, that's kind of the thought behind this, how these things are working. We looked at pretty much most of the ditches. Some of the ditches didn't need anything. This is one right here. You come up here to this cut here. It's one I looked at. I ran my ditch line and I looked, and we got water that's going to flow down on this red line, and then it's going to daylight out and it's going to hit that culvert. Perfect. I didn't have to do anything there. I didn't have to do any manual control or override of the ditch there. I was happy with what it was doing. You come to this next one here. This next one up, this will probably be the last one I show you, but so here we come, and now we're almost getting to the driveway and the dairy here. So here's the dairy and here's the driveway, and so we got a culvert and an inlet basin right here. You can kind of see my profile there, but so right here again, we're following. Here comes the ditch as built by the typical section, and then right in here you can see right here I start diverging because I wanted to steepen that ditch up a little bit to make sure we got good flow coming around that corner. So rather than just letting the assembly control, I took control of it, and I'm basically forcing it to come down at almost 1% to come down around this guy here. And then you can see that in my lines. You can see my yellow line where the ditch would have been, and the green line where the ditch is, or where it's designed. And it's converged here, and it diverges as you go through. And right here's your deepest or your most separated spot. And then as you come back, we actually start to tie back into where the ditch would have been. And then we start to diverge again as we head towards this culvert over here for the inlet basin. So all these things were built in the model. There's not, it's not like, I guess they're not on the plans per se, but they are in the model. It's the same thing on this line here, and I know we're having some struggles with it. Let's see, turn this a little bit. We've got a similar thing going on here, where we're taking control of this ditch here. We want the ditch to flow out and through this culvert and then through over there. So this is what we're doing. We're taking control of it, sloping it down, hitting where the culvert's going to be here to here, and then daylighting it out. That's how we're going to control the ditch, separate from whatever the center line's doing. So just because the center line's sloping a certain way doesn't necessarily mean the ditch is going to be that way. It's the same, this whole other half over here, I believe, so I believe this is the Clayburns over here. This one has a lot of that. We're just so shallow through here that we needed to start controlling the ditch in order to get good flow. And even then, we don't have great flow, but it's better than what it would have done without controlling it. It comes down and hits our culverts here, and we've got our inlet basins. Anyway, and so this whole ditch along this, basically most of line A, was actually designed rather than just letting the typical section and center line dictate what's going on. So you can see it. Here's a low spot in the culvert. Here's a low spot in the culvert, and we're putting these low spots in the ditch. We're actually controlling the ditch. And then once we kind of get around here, then we're happy with what the ditch is doing on its own. And then once we get here, again, I just wanted to steepen things up a little bit, make sure we got um, down into this culvert here, and some of our culverts we weren't able to get real good. I mean, ideally, you should have this at the very bottom of the culvert, right? Um, but that's just kind of how it worked out in order to get good grades through here. Anyway, I wanted to just show you that this is why we have different alignments, profiles, targets, things on the corridor that we're trying to do so that we can control these ditches more than just letting the center line control, because the center line just didn't have a lot of slope. So we just didn't have a lot of slope sometimes to mess with on these roads. So anyway, so for now I'm going to kick some stuff out to Colt, and I'm going to give him some stations where these ditches are doing what I just showed you. So this particular station, I'll kick him out and say, all right, right near 199.50 to, let's see, 207.50. That ditch there is being controlled by something other than the typical section. So we need to go check to see if they built it to the model, these things would have just been built in. If they didn't, and they were just trying to match slope stakes and just kind of feather it into what they thought the ditch would be, then they're missing a significant amount of material there. So anyway, sorry to be long-winded. I just wanted to explain what it was we were doing and the thoughts behind it. Happy for feedback if people have issues or better solutions to things. Thanks.